Well, welcome back. And this is the last episode in our Sister Sign series. Very excited about it. We're going to be talking about Leo and Aquarius energy today, as long as the Mercury retrograde gods let us, that is, because of
Please.
course, yeah, please, will be really good. Leo and Aquarius energy. Let's get into it. Let's get right into it. So, Leo is ruled by the sun. It is a fire sign, it's a fixed sign, and it is symbolized by the lion. And it's typically associated with the fifth house in an astrology chart. And in terms of the human body, Leo governs the back, the spine, and the heart. So, what comes to mind for you guys when you think of Leo energy?
I think of like creativity and self-expression and like the visual that I always think of, like, because it's a fire sign, I think of like a bonfire where it's kind of
Mhm.
like it's fixed fire, so it's like not moving, and it's kind of like the fire like puts on a show for us, and it brings us warmth, and it brings people together, and that's kind of like that energy of Leo, I think, and it really encapsulates it really well. And yeah, it's just like this life giver energy, and being ruled by the sun. Um, yeah, and so it's just like this creative, warm, generous, expressive energy. I don't know what, there's a lot to say about Leo, I feel like.
So, Leo, of course, follows the sign of Cancer. And so, your bonfire metaphor reminds me, my family does this bonfire thing every year, and it's on the beach. And so, it's like after a day of swimming, we do the
Oh,
bonfire. It's like the end of the day. And that just really reminds me of like the procession of those two energies is, you spend all day fucking around in the beach and feeling your feels and
playing.
yeah, exactly. And then evening time we all gather around the bonfire. So I thought that was cool.
Oh, I love that.
What about you, Jen? Leo energy.
Leo just reminds me of like one of those really enthusiastic children that will like talk your ear off and just like has all of these stories or like ideas for games and stuff. And it's just like, where do they get all of this energy? Where do they they just keep going? They have that inner fire, that inner Leo fixed fire is such a like wonderful source, I guess, of that creativity and just playfulness. Like Leo does give me very like they just like to have fun, Girls just want to have fun.
Yeah.
Like they're
I think,
not there for anybody else but them, and I kind of respect it.
Yeah, fair enough. Makes sense.
right.
I think of all of that, the creativity, the playfulness, and the sort of childlike aspect of Leo energy in the sense that it's like a pure form of joy, and we kind of
Mhm.
think of children, I think, when we think of that, true, just unfiltered expression of joy. But I also think of pride a lot when it comes to Leo energy because, I've had people in my life with strong Leo placements, and when they feel strongly about something, or, if somebody is doing something that they find personally offensive, it's just like they inflate in this way and they don't back down. And so I think that's
Mhm.
also a really common expression of that Leo energy, especially I feel like Leo Mercury energy. It's like, yeah, if they think something and you don't think that thing, there's certain situations where they're gonna really like take a stand on it.
Yeah, you're gonna know what they think.
Hmm.
It's gonna be very
Yeah.
loud. My dad has a Leo
Mm.
Mercury, and his voice is just very,
Booming.
yes, very loud, and his laugh is also very loud. Like I can hear it across the house if he's like watching football or TV or anything. His laugh just ha ha like shakes the house.
I think for a lot of Leo energy, there isn't the self consciousness that can come with other types of energy. And so that's why it's kind of, I think for those of us that don't have Leo placements, sometimes it can be like a little annoying feeling. And I say this, the caveat being that I have plenty of people with Leo placements in my life that I love. And so I'm not calling Leos annoying, and I'm saying this because I know that y'all will let me know if you have a problem with this. So I'm not saying y'all are annoying. I'm saying you can be annoying, just like every other sign. Every sign can be annoying, but I think that's the way that Leo can be
Mm-hmm.
annoying, is that there's not this self limitation that a lot of us can have. And so I think that goes back to the purity of expression of joy. It's just like, well, this is how I feel, so I'm feeling the way that I feel. And, on some level, yeah, like why should you modify how you feel too much, based on the reactions of the people around you. So I think there's like something to that. But for the rest of us, sometimes it can be like, damn.
Yeah, I think just with the Leo energy, they are
hmm
very like so much themselves, and society kind of
hmm
teaches us that we need to like make ourselves smaller. And when somebody else refuses to do that, it's kind of like, why are you? It's like, whoa, you're like breaking the rules, but they're just being themselves. And,
hmm
I really do respect when you just get somebody that's just fully, taking up the space that they need. And, I think that's really cool. Even though sometimes it's just kind of like, damn, like you're taking up a lot of space, but if that's what
Right.
you feel in your heart, then go ahead, I guess.
I think a lot of that stuff is so socially enforced, right? Like we police each other essentially to how we should behave and should act. And I think a lot of the times with that Leo energy being so big and so bold, it can kind of make other people uncomfortable, and it might be triggering the fact that like they've been modifying themselves in certain ways, and so it
Hmm.
can feel like a threat, even though is it really a threat? You know what I mean? Like it's really funny. Another thing that makes me think of Leo energy is last year when I was on the picket line, once the actors really joined the writers on the picket line, the Leo energy, because Leo, is the sign of the performer. And so as soon as we were flooded with all of these actors on the picket line, the vibe shifted so immensely. And it was like all these
Oh
people
God.
like filming themselves and like doing TikToks. And people were doing TikToks before,
Hmm.
but it took on a completely different tone. And it was just so funny because I was like, oh my God, the Leo energy. And it's like everywhere. There's like hundreds of people here and they're being like, Leo, Leo. It was just like for me, I have no personal placements in Leo. I have a Leo Jupiter, so there's a little taste in there, but like my personality, I'm not super Leonian. And I was just like, oh my God, it
Hmm.
was a lot for my digestion on that. But
They just have like this main character energy, and it's more positive or whatever expression. Like, everybody is the main character in their own story. And I think sometimes when it gets like too big, like they get these big egos and like these big heads or whatever. And so then they think that like they're the main character in other people's lives.
right.
And so that can be kind of like that negative side of the energy, I think, sometimes. And um, just like this performance, and almost to the point where it becomes like phony.
hmm
So it's kind of like this fine line,
Yeah.
I've noticed.
Yeah, because with an insecure Leo, that self consciousness can enter into the picture in the sense that they're like, oh, who
Mhm.
is seeing me be myself? Who is seeing me express?
Yes.
And,
Mhm.
as a performer, like it does make sense in certain instances because it's like if you are literally performing, generally speaking, there's probably an audience involved, and so it's like good to have that awareness. But if you're so focused on how other people are receiving what you're doing, I think that kind of dulls the shine
Yes.
of a Leo. And it's a common thing because, socially, I think we don't value everybody the same. And I think in
Mhm.
a culture that has a lot of disdain for, if you're not above a certain level, then, who cares about you kind of thing, then I can
Mhm.
see what drives that need to be validated, to be recognized. If we had a culture where I think people were more universally validated and everybody could kind of be their own main character, then maybe that wouldn't be as true.
Yeah, it kind of feels
Mm-hmm.
like with those insecure, like Leo and Aquarius to some extent, like you're instead of just being fully yourself, you're kind of in your head being like the director of your life and like how will this come across to other people instead of it being like when you are fully in yourself, you're just doing those things without as much regard for how people are perceiving it, so there's um, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, are you living your life being the main character, or are you like a director, kind of moving the marionette of your
Mm-hmm.
body in a way that is pleasing to other people?
Yeah, I feel like that's when it's important. Leo governs our heart, so I think that's when it's important to like come back to your heart center and be like, okay, like what lights me up and like what am I passionate about, because otherwise it kind of feels empty in
Mm-hmm.
a way. It has to come from that heart, like that heart-centered energy, I feel like.
I feel like the difference would be, a metaphor for that would be like a performer who truly enjoys performing and connects with what they're doing and would do it completely, by themselves, alone in their room if they didn't have any other way of doing that, versus, people who just want to be famous and just need the
Yes.
recognition. That Leo energy can be really beautiful when it's authentic, when it's tied to something personal versus tied to, how other people receive that energy.
Yeah, it's kind of like, are you
Mm-hmm.
getting your validation from yourself, from feeling like good in your heart? I mean, this is what I'm passionate about, this is what I love, or are you getting it from other people telling you that you're good and that what you're doing is right and that
Mm-hmm.
you're acting in the right way? So, I mean, yeah, just like coming back into yourself and being very grounded in yourself, that's
Yeah.
when I think the Leo energy just like shines so bright and it's so warm. And I know we're kind of like maybe shitting on
Mm-hmm.
Leo a little bit, but I really love them when they are in that like heart space, like fully in them, because that it just radiates out of them. And if you are in like close proximity or in the inner circle of a Leo that is that way, that is very, like heart centered, you can just feel it and it like affects and is, I don't know, like a positive for everybody in their life.
Yeah. I mean, that's, Leo energy is ruled by the sun, which is, the life giver in terms of life on earth. So when somebody is really aligned with who they are and they're just basically glowing on an energetic level, that glow can kind of light up the people around them. That vitality can extend beyond, just the sun itself, as happens in
Mm-hmm.
our solar system. So it's a very powerful energy in that sense, because it's like either way, it's there's a strong ramification for like expressing that energy. It's going to make an impact in one way or another. I wanted to talk about the symbolism of the lion, because one of the things that it makes me think of is oftentimes if you look at, especially, European royalty, the lion is a symbol that you see, on a lot of like iconography and stuff. And so there is an association between Leo and royalty. And I think that that really kind of speaks to what we've been talking about, because, the very concept of royalty is that these are people that are separate but above other people. And,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, human beings have this interesting way of making up hierarchy like that. And so these are the chosen people. And so that, I think, on a personal level can kind of reflect with that energy. It's like, are you somebody that can collaborate with other people? Can you, just be authentic in and of yourself without placing yourself in a separate category, and putting yourself above other people? Because I think that makes the Leo energy a lot less enjoyable in a lot of cases. But, and then on the flip side, there have been instances where royalty is really beloved. And, yes, there's like an elevation there, but, the benevolent overlords that, have a heart for their people and they can host banquets and celebrations for their people and be beloved in that sense. So it's like, yeah, there's theoretically, a way that can't be super negative, but if you're into hierarchy, there could be like a benevolent royalty potentially.
Even if it's not necessarily like a hierarchy, or maybe if you're just like in a team and it's like the leader being like the Leo,
Hmm.
there can be like this sort of,
Mm-hmm.
if you're elevating yourself so far above other people, you're just directing what they're doing versus like seeing yourself as a part of the team. Like maybe you have a more important role, quote unquote, but you still like help other people and see them as like important pieces to the group instead of
Hmm.
it's just me kind of energy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There are some people that I think are more suited to leadership, and it's not because they're better than other people, but it's like I feel like a Leo would have more skill potentially in being a spokesperson of some kind. And so that in that sense, if we're talking about like a benevolent royalty, for example, that's, they're a representative of their people. Like before, we did more representative governments, that's what we had was a lot of, royalty, and they were functionally the representative of their people. And so in that sense, like some people are just more suited, they have the personal skills and the personality to be the person that stands up at the podium and communicates information, or takes the lead in whatever way. And so in that sense, like I think that can be a really positive thing, because again, not everybody is right for that particular job. It's just, you know does that job make you like more valuable? No, not necessarily, because there's all these other people that have to do other roles, and those are important too.
Mm-hmm.
It just reminds me of Elizabeth Holmes and her company, where she was like the spokesperson speaking up all of these things, but then behind the scenes there was no substance. It was just her
Right.
like talk making this big talk
Yeah.
but having nothing to back it up. That can be like a negative
I
expression
mean,
of that energy.
yeah, it's hot air, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like without that, then yeah, it is all talk and it is all posturing. So you know, it's important that it be more than that in a lot of cases. What do you think are some stereotypes about Leo energy that jump out to you? The dramatics, I will say.
Yes. Yeah. Or like just like self-centered, egotistical. I think those are like some common things that like the memes really latch
Hmm.
onto.
Right.
Yeah, kind of like self-obsessed, self-absorbed.
And like sometimes I feel like it's that need for like they need like a pat on the head sometimes, that need for approval or like
Right.
validation or appreciation or whatever, but I don't think that always has to be a bad thing. I think it's okay to
Yeah.
get that every once in a while, but to need it constantly, it can be like a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this trap that people fall into with needing reassurance that like it's constant. Like you get somebody that will, you know, validate you in whatever way, and then like 5 minutes later, like what I need someone to do it again because I'm unsure. Um, yeah, it's just
Hmm.
it's like a cycle. So of course it's nice to be
Yeah.
recognized, but if you need it all the
Hmm.
time, you kind of need to learn to validate yourself and not rely so much on other people's thoughts on that.
Yeah. I
Hmm.
think that goes back to the rulership with the sun, because again, the sun is the center of the solar system. It doesn't really need other planets to validate, other energies to validate it in any way. It is what it is. And so I think the more that people with Leo energy can understand that simply just being and being in a way that is authentic is really plenty. And, if you get feedback from other people, great. But like either way, you do you, kind of a thing.
Hmm.
Let's talk about Aquarius. Aquarius is ruled by Saturn and Uranus. It is an air sign, it is a fixed sign, and it is symbolized by the water bearer. and it's associated with the 11th house in astrology. And in terms of the human body, it governs the ankles. Very sexy. What comes to mind when you think of Aquarius energy besides ankles?
I think of like interconnectedness and especially like the internet in the modern
Mm-hmm.
era. Um, yeah, and somebody that has very unique
Chronically online.
ideas. Yeah, they're like
Yes.
very forward thinking. Like it gives me be like yeah, like kind of a nerd kind of.
Yeah. I often think of Aquarius energy as sort of being out of time, which I think is so interesting because I think we are always tied to the time that we're in inherently. So I'm not saying that like literally they're out of time, but there is this. I feel like an Aquarian is sort of like they're attached to the time they're in and not at the same time. And I think that makes for some really interesting expression.
Yeah. That's kind of interesting because when I like first started learning astrology, I was kind of like putting, images with like each sign just to help me like try and learn it better. And I put the ozone layer for Aquarius, which I find like
Mm,
that was actually very insightful of young
yeah.
astrologer me. But it's just
Go
like,
young
it's
Mackenzie.
fixed, right? It's like this fixed air, it's up
Hmm.
there, and it's just like this zoomed out lens that I feel like Aquarians are really good
Hmm.
for. And it's like, um, it unites humanity. Everyone is under this ozone layer, and, Aquarians are like united, it's humanity in general, but, and also it's co-ruled by Saturn. So it's kind of like that outer boundary. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just that thing that unites us all. We're all under the ozone layer in the sky.
For now, until we further
For
destroy
now,
it.
yeah. Oh
Yeah.
God. I
Sorry.
didn't
Sorry
even
to bring
think
it
of
down.
that.
Sorry
The
to bring
hole.
it down. I know. I know. The O in the zone.
The gaping
Um,
hole.
the cape. The cape of the zone.
Sorry.
Uranus.
I had I had to say it.
We needed to say it. It needed to be said. It needed to be said. You know what's funny is that Aquarius energy, I feel like it definitely has its haters. I will say that. I've seen plenty of Aquarius haters. What I will say is that I don't think that Aquarians get as much flack for being like center of attention, pick me's as Aquarians, and they are just as much.
Dude, it's
Just as much.
just as bad as Leo. Just as bad.
Just as much.
It,
Oh yeah.
what I think of is like Aquarius is like the loner in the corner of the party that's like having these philosophical discussions like I'm above it
I'm so
all. And then
different.
like
Mhm.
Yeah.
Leo's the one that's like the jock like in the center like doing all of
Mhm.
these crazy things to get attention. They're both getting attention from different audiences in different ways. It's
And
not
kind of loving it.
yeah, they're like I don't like the attention, but they low key
Yeah.
do. Like they're just as much a
Yeah.
main
Yeah.
character. I speak from experience
I'm
because I'm very
different.
Aquarian, so like I know.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, Jen is our representative of Aquarian energy today. None of us have any
Hmm.
Leo placements, so, personal placements rather.
Yeah.
It is what it is. But
I'm not like other girls. That's very
That
Aquarian.
was me growing up, like so, so bad.
Oh my God.
Like I'm different. I'm not.
Yeah.
the way that my chart is set up, I have had a lot of really close relationships with Aquarians. And
Mm,
it kind of clicked when I started studying astrology. I was like, oh, there's like a lot of people that have really been that just saw the real depths of me and that were Aquarians, and it's a lot of it is in my eighth house. So it's pretty fascinating. But I have a lot of experience being around Aquarians, and I feel like very attracted to that energy for whatever reason.
hmm
And I think that part of it is that, you know, like they do give a fuck there, and there's an awareness there of others for sure. But there's also this quality of really not giving a fuck a lot of times,
hmm
in the sense that yeah, they might be interested in what other people are doing and thinking and the reactions and, the attention, whatever. But at the same time, there is a certain element of many Aquarians where they're just going to do their thing kind of regardless.
Yeah.
And I really admire that because it is something that, especially in a world that feels very like conformist a lot of times, it can be very refreshing.
Yeah, that makes me think of the symbol of the water bearer. Of like they're holding this vessel, which is like humanity represented by like the water and like the culture and the times, but they are apart from it, they're holding it. So like they have it, but they understand it, they know the times we live in, they're like, taking care of it, but also like they're doing something a little different.
Right.
They're not as affected by it, or there's like kind of a
Mhm.
detachment from, I don't know, you know, the zeitgeist.
Yeah. Well, let's talk
Mhm.
about the water bearer symbology because it's pretty different symbolically than a lot of the other astrological symbols. And so the idea is that if you live in a community, you need water. And so somebody would have to go get that water, and that would be the Aquarian. They would be bringing the life-sustaining water back to the community. And so to me that's about like, yeah, they're a part of the community. They're essential. They're a very essential part of the community. Like the community lives or dies whether or not the water the water is transported back to the community, right? But at the same time, the Aquarian is going outside of the community to bring back something essential to the rest of the community. And so
Mhm.
it's a part of and yet outside.
Yeah, it's very, very Aquarian energy.
It's giving.
Mhm.
So it's interesting because it's an air sign and yet water, water, water. It's fascinating. And so one of the, I think, maybe stereotypes about Aquarius energy is that it is very cerebral. And
Mhm.
so it's interesting. The water is in a vessel, right? It's when you bear water, it's in something. You got to carry it in something. And so it's like holding water. Water typically symbolizes, the more emotional side of the human experience. And so it's like holding that emotionality, but yet not necessarily like engaged in it or wrapped up in it, which is kind of
Mhm.
fascinating. I think it really reflects that kind of more cerebral quality that Aquarians can have. And I think that goes back to the rulership of Uranus, which is, I guess, higher intelligence would be a way of describing it. And what do you guys think about that? Like
Yeah.
the relationship between intelligence and Aquarian energy?
I tend to think of like the Aquarius glyph, which is like, the two squiggly lines. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's like symbolizes like brain waves, like that
Mm,
almost like telepathy. And I think of with Aquarius, it's like that inventive, intuitive, and innovative energy that
hmm.
can only come through like almost like divine inspiration sometimes. And
Yeah.
it's kind of that energy that pushes humanity forward. It's like that constant, like future moving energy, I feel like,
Hmm.
that helps humanity evolve. And um, it's interesting because Aquarius governs things like science and technology and, even metaphysics and astrology. I think that's always interesting. And um, it's just, I don't know, just this forward moving energy. And like, I don't know. My mind is trailing off right now, but
That's okay. We have
that's,
Mercury retrograde and it's allowed to
yes.
trail off. We all have well, I don't know if we all have ADHD. Several of us have
Oh,
ADHD.
I do.
Yeah. So, you know the fucking vibes. My thoughts about Aquarian energy and that sense of inspiration and the intelligence. Uranus energy is to me disruptive. in the sense that it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that like mass chaos is at every turn with Uranian energy. What it does mean is that in some sense there is like the lightning bolt is I think a good symbol for
Mm-hmm.
Uranian energy because it kind of it's comes out of nowhere seemingly, from our
Mm-hmm.
perspective as human beings. And for me, I think about a lot of times when we have realizations or we have these epiphanies, they are disruptive in a certain sense because there's what you knew before, what you thought before, and then there's after. There's after you have
Mm-hmm.
that lightning bolt of information or inspiration or whatever it is hit. There's a before and an after. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, that higher intelligence, as some would call it, it's like if you want to engage with that type of information, it requires you letting go of what you knew before to make room for what you know now. And that I think
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of people is actually uncomfortable. For an Aquarian, I think it's a lot more natural
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
because I think it's probably more regular. Like they just keep on coming, and so you these hits of inspiration, these realizations. But that to me, higher intelligence, that's what it means. Is like this radical departure from what you knew before to what you knew now, and to me, that is a sign of intelligence. Is not clinging to what you knew before just because it's familiar.
Agreed.
Yeah. I see sort of talk about like the Saturn rulership of Aquarius because it is representing like the boundaries of what we know. And then that Uranian is like we're just
Mm-hmm.
grasping things outside of that and pulling it in. Um, an Aquarian do need to be kind of grounded because if they're not, they can kind of get stuck beyond the boundary and keep grasping at
Mm-hmm.
things, and it can be very jumbled and not make a lot of sense. So you have to have that sort of
Yeah.
discipline side of it, that Saturnian side of it, to be able to integrate that information into what you already know. Like there's, yeah,
Yeah.
you can't just be like pulling in these crazy ideas, and then if they don't
Mm-hmm.
make any sense in the framework of your world, then it's kind of useless, like it's just
Right.
Mm-hmm.
information for information's sake. And I feel like Aquarians like to have utilitarian ideas, if
Mm-hmm.
you're maybe on a more like constructive side of things instead of just trying to burn everything down. There's certainly, that side of Aquarians that are just like, fuck the world. Like, I hate it here. Like, everybody sucks. They're all stupid. I know so much better. Everybody should just listen to
Right.
me.
The
But
Mm-hmm.
superiority. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, there's a lot
Yes.
of that.
I think that's really important to talk about too, and it is that flip side of the Leo energy in the sense where it can feel like maybe if you do have access to certain information or certain things feel more familiar to you than they might feel to your average Joe, it can kind of feel there's a separation that can be created there and can be reinforced. And it's like, oh, I'm just so much better than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I just know so much. And, that can be kind of its own, thing.
Yeah, that would be like the
Mm-hmm.
water bearer getting the water, bringing it back, but just hoarding it to themselves.
Yeah.
Be like, I'm so much better because I went and got this, and you guys don't deserve it. You didn't do the work. But the like
Yeah.
more benevolent side, more evolved, so to say, side of Aquarius is bringing that back, recognizing like, yeah, I did the work to go and get this, but it's for the good of everybody, not just me.
And when we think about, you know, we can think about like Aquarians being like built different and being not like other girls. And at the same time, if you get into that superiority complex, isn't the underlying note there like, why isn't everybody more like me? Which is kind of ironic if you consider like, Aquarians being, pick me if they're at an extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's like, well, if everybody was like you wouldn't really be you, would you? Like, and they wouldn't be them. And would that really be the solution? Would you actually like that? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that seems like my nightmare. Like a community of
Right?
just Aquariuses. Like, no.
Right? Like everybody just like looking down their nose and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that it's interesting because right now, like with Pluto in Aquarius, we're exploring this energy on a major level, on a collective level, and we're also seeing the rise of fascism. And so that is an expression of everybody should be in this narrow box. And when we think of Aquarius energy at the highest level, we think, oh, that means that everybody can be who they really are. And that, people being different from one another is actually a strength. Because again, why would we want carbon copies of everybody being the same? That would be very unproductive and probably really annoying. So on the other side, everybody being the same is kind of a hallmark of fascism. Oh God. Or fitting into a very narrow box. So it's interesting. I just don't want people to think that just because Aquarian energy is involved, that means it's that damn song, The Dawning of the Age of Aquarius. I think that people have internalized that to mean that it's, we're all just like elevated and we all are like getting it and we're all sharing space and it's all good. And that's just a real simplification of the potential variations for Aquarian energy for sure.
Hmm. Like human communities are messy, and
Mm-hmm.
having relationships with other people isn't always going to be perfect. You have to know how to have like conflict and how to talk through things and how to accept other people's ideas or challenging you, even if like you went out and got this like shiny new information that you think everybody needs, like recognizing like you need to be able to defend that and to convince people, and just having
Mm-hmm.
this like, this is what I think, this is what I found out, you have to listen to me, is like that sort of like fascist kind of
Yeah.
idea of that, of like, you need to fit into my box because I decided this is right,
Mm-hmm.
you know like, yeah. And having a healthy community isn't that way. Not everybody's
Right.
going to think the same as you, and that's okay.
Yeah. Another image I think of when I think of Aquarian energy is like the mad scientist. And that's
Mm-hmm.
another thing. It's like when you're talking about intelligence and you're talking about innovation, usually the people that are on the cutting edge of things are often regarded as being like off their rockers. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the mad scientist is like, well, are you really detached from reality and you're just like off doing your own like wild thing? And that's, I think, an important thing of what you were saying, Jen, is that it's important to be grounded in community and the fact that you are part of a collective, which is an important aspect of Aquarian energy, even in comparison to Leo energy, is that there's a more of a collective quality to Aquarian energy than there is with Leo, and that is true of Pisces energy as well. I think Pisces and Aquarius are the two signs that have a really strong association with the collective in different definitions of that. But I think, even if you are on the cutting edge of things, it's important to be in relationship to the fact that you are on earth, that you are a human being and that you live among other human beings. And so not to detach from that completely
Hmm.
when you're, doing your innovation. Otherwise you get, like a Dr. Frankenstein like type of situation, right? Like, oh, you're doing things that are an abomination and that are disregarding the understandings that we have as human beings and some of these rules that we think are pretty good ideas, for the sake of innovation. Like, you've lost sight of this other thing that you should be grounded in.
Yeah, I think another like negative stereotype that Leos or that Aquarians get a lot is that they are like robotic and like
Mm.
unfeeling and detached, um, which I think is like, yeah, that can be a thing.
Yeah.
Like there's a certain like,
Aloof.
yeah, like
Mm-hmm.
holding away other people or
Mm-hmm.
feelings or things that are uncomfortable to like kind of, I don't know, preserve their sense of, I don't know, being up in the air, like just thinking la la
Mm-hmm.
la.
It's the
Yeah.
uh, the
Yeah.
concept of the unbiased observer, which when we look at it, like, you're always going to have some level of bias just because you're a human being. And like, can we calculate for that versus being like, oh, I don't have any opinion and I'm detached, and like, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if that's true. That's not true. You're a
Mm-hmm.
human.
Yeah.
And yeah, so Aquarius is the sign that governs humanity, and that's an important facet of it, because
Mm-hmm.
humanity, just like Aquarians, just like every sign that we've talked about, is complex. It's not all the same. We could have talked about each one of these signs in this series for hours and hours and hours on end. And, people
Mm-hmm.
have. Other podcasts have done
Mm-hmm.
that.
Sure.
Yeah. Other podcasts have done that. You could do that. We could do that because there is so much variation. And I think at its highest level, Aquarian energy can really make room for that variety of human expression, because it's an
Mm-hmm.
essential part of what it means to be a human being. Like, we're not all going to be the same. And referring back to that higher intelligence, I think at the highest level of intelligence, understanding that, again, if everybody had the same information, if everybody was working from similar perspectives, it actually would not be innovative, it would not be progressive, it would not be moving things forward, because you would be very limited. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that that's kind of at the heart of Aquarian energy.
I feel like that's kind of like that good balance between like Leo and Aquarius is kind of like, be your own character, your own main character in your own life, but also
Mm-hmm.
recognize that you're in a community and
Yeah.
you're a part of humanity. And so it's kind of like you're your own bonfire, but in a crowd of billions of bonfires.
Yeah.
So kind of finding that balance is important.
Absolutely. And well, let's talk about Leo and Aquarius energy as sister signs. That's a perfect transition, because
Mm.
I say this so much in readings that, yeah, you Leo are the main character. And guess what? So is everybody else. And that's Aquarius,
Mm-hmm.
I think, is that everybody can be the main character,
Mm-hmm.
because truly the reality of the situation is that there's nobody that is like any one of us in this plane of reality, that we are all unique. And so the more
Mm-hmm.
that we can embrace that, I think the more productive we can be as a collective, because Aquarius does rule humanity. It rules the collective of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
I think these signs are a lot more alike than we think.
Yeah, I think for both
Right?
both
They
of the
really are.
signs, for both Leo and Aquarius, there can be this kind of like idea that, yeah, I'm not like other girls, I'm so different, and like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm special, and a lot of the times it's just like, you're a lot more alike to other people than you might like
Mm-hmm.
to admit, and
Yeah, and
that's
Mm-hmm.
not a
that's not a
bad
bad
thing.
thing.
Yeah, like it's
Mm-hmm.
Literally, yeah, it's not. And
Well, just like with that Leo energy, it's kind of like we all have our own unique individual flame and inner light, and
mhm,
each one of those is important to kind of like combine all of our lights together with that Aquarius. I know that's kind of like what I said, but in a different
mhm,
way. Um,
yeah,
but yeah,
absolutely.
it's just like, and each light is important in its own way, and each light fits into like the puzzle kind of
Mhm.
in a way. We all have our own place, and um, you don't have to stay in one place forever, but it's kind of like each light's important.
Yeah.
That's my
Mhm.
takeaway.
And I think if we're talking about like human progress, it's going to take a lot of different perspectives and skills and abilities to move the collective forward, and to like make use of all of this wisdom that each one of us has. There
Hmm.
has to be room for everybody to express in some way, to like kind of reap the collective benefits of that.
It also makes me think of like the Leo creativity. There needs to be some form of like inspiration, Aquarius. And I think Aquarius energy is very, very creative because you have to be creative in order to innovate and kind of like make things better and move humanity forward. That like
Mhm.
futuristic thinking, like you have to be creative and think outside of the box. So it's kind of like, that polarity again, just kind of that balancing. It's very similar energy. It's so funny.
Yeah, I also think of Aquarius as the audience, because if you are
Hmm.
a creative person that puts things out into the world, so if you are that Leo energy that is creating and putting, a part of yourself out into the world, the receiver is, humanity. It's the collective. It's that Aquarian energy. And so those two signs, the relationship between the creator and the audience, I think is
Mm-hmm.
one of the big things with this polarity.
Yeah.
And like the ramifications of your creativity, like does it have a larger impact? You know, something doesn't need to touch every single person to have an impact on the collective.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I was thinking about when Mackenzie was talking about everybody having their own like little spark. And then like when you join with other people, that being like a flame. So you don't have to like work with everybody, get along with
Mm-hmm.
everybody. Just find those people that you click with, that your message resonates with, that like what you do. And then you guys make like a beautiful bonfire together that you can all like gather around and share ideas. It's beautiful.
Love it.
And I think that in terms of, you know, like a lot of signs, I mean, I think that this is true of really any sign, but I think for these two signs in particular, the kind of Achilles heel, the Achilles ankle for
Mm-hmm.
these two signs is disconnection from the collective and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
elevation usually. Or but I mean another thing about that is that also thinking that you're the worst and beating yourself up is a form of like, it's the same, we
Yes.
don't think of it as in the same way as people that, you know, lord over other people. But in this
Mm-hmm.
sense, it is almost the same thing as like, oh, I'm so special that I'm like the worst person ever. And it's like, well, probably you're
Right.
not. Probably you're not. But either in either instance, it's creating a separation from that larger collective, that every single
Mm-hmm.
Leo is part of the collective. Like you, just because you're, you know, a Leo, just because you're super special, talented, wonderful, creative, doesn't mean that you are a separate entity from the rest of us. And the more that I think both of these signs can retain that sense of connectivity, I think the better. I think that those signs do beautifully when they retain that kind of groundedness and the fact that there's a larger collective that they're a part of.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I love that. It's,
Yeah.
I think, easy for people to see the egotistical nature of being like putting yourself above other people, but putting yourself below everybody is just as egotistical. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's that
Mm-hmm.
same that polarity. Like you're almost
Yeah.
almost assuredly not better than everybody and you're not worse than everybody. Like you're most people are just somewhere in the middle and that's okay. And beating yourself up
Mm-hmm.
and putting yourself down and kind of taking yourself away from the community is hurting everybody and not just you. And you're not
Mm-hmm.
helping people by just staying away. That's, I think, a part of this Pluto in
Mm-hmm.
Aquarius era that we're going through is realizing that we all have an impact on the collective. We even just think about ourselves and speak to ourselves, impact other people. So being like mindful of like
Mm-hmm.
what you do inside and that you are just one small piece, but like a puzzle's not complete if you have like a piece missing. That's just like holding itself either above or
Mm-hmm.
below everybody. Like I need to, quarantine myself because I'm just so horrible and awful. Like, you're not
Mm-hmm.
probably actually that bad and people need you. Even if it's just like you just
Yeah.
living
Mm-hmm.
your life and being happy, like that elevates everybody.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
everybody has something to offer. Everybody has Leo in their chart. Everybody has Aquarius. All of the signs. We have all of these signs that we've talked about in this series in our chart. So even if you're like, you know, I hate this one sign, or you were mean to my sign or whatever, like we all have all of these signs in our chart. So this energy is expressing in some way. And so with that Leo energy, we all have something to contribute to the collective creatively. And if you're like, oh, I'm not an
Mm-hmm.
artist, it doesn't matter, because the way that you live your life, the way that you approach the things that you do is part of your creative self-expression.
Yes.
And with the Aquarian energy, it's like we can learn from all of it. Even this shit we don't like, we can learn from. We can learn from all of the spectrum of humanity, and it tells us something about the collective. And
Yeah. That just reminds me of what Asanabe talks about in his lives of the gift the creator gave to humans is the ability to create. That is our role. And, just creating your
Mm-hmm.
life, just living your life, like however you like put together your house or, like anything that you do, that's a creative act. And the power that we have as human beings
Mm-hmm.
is to make things, do things in the world,
Mm-hmm.
make change,
Mm-hmm.
so you need to be able to tap into that and not just think like
Yeah,
I'm so awful, like everything I do is bad,
right.
like that's you know
Mm-hmm.
So this is making me think about Pluto and Aquarius because that's all I ever think about, apparently. But when we think about Leo, we think about the creativity. I want us to think about when we think about Aquarius, also the creativity, because that is
Mm-hmm.
the creativity that happens when human beings come together. That's what Aquarian energy is, and it can be just as creative because especially with Pluto and Aquarius, we are finding exactly how much power we have when we can come together in an organized fashion for a shared purpose. And
Mm-hmm.
that's also like how human beings are progressing because again, Aquarius is the sign that governs humanity. And so if we look at the history of humanity, it's about innovation. It's about how human beings work together or don't. And that is creative. Like the story of human beings on earth is a story that we created by the acts of how we've lived our lives, how we've worked together or not worked together. We are writing a collective story. And that's what Aquarius energy is about. And so with Pluto and Aquarius, it's a matter of like, what is the story that we're writing together right now? And
Mm-hmm.
how do we do that? How do we like practically do that?
Mm-hmm.
All
yeah.
right.
Period.
This is the end of our sister sign series. It's been such fun to like talk about these
Yeah.
energies together and in contrast. I just want to say we're going to do another
Hell
series.
yeah,
I think we're going to do planets next.
there's more to
So,
come.
Well, and I feel like with these sister sign series, like I think it just shows that like how each sign is so important in its own way and like how it all blends together and how each person has every single sign. I think that's important to stress because some people are like, well, I don't have Pisces in my chart. I'm like, yes you do, yes you do, we all have every single sign. So
and that is another way that we create separation, which drives me crazy when we talk about astrology because so astrology is also governed by Aquarius.
mm-hmm,
And to me, the way that, I'm assuming for Mackenzie and Jen too, the way that we use astrology is a tool for greater connection and understanding. It's
mm-hmm,
the most human field of study that I've ever come across. And I was a humanities person. So, like, all of it's, humanities, but it's like the ultimate humanity for me.
mm-hmm,
And so when people use it to be like, oh, I hate this sign and they're always terrible and, da da da, not most people that say that don't do that with the recognition that they have the sign that they're hating on in their own chart. And the fact of the
yep,
matter is that when we get down to it, when we start looking into all of these signs, we all have this type of variation within us.
mm-hmm,
It's a tool that helps you see your connection to others if that's the way that you choose to approach it.
mm-hmm,
And so I think that's a wonderful benefit of this series is like I think we've been able to demonstrate that very clearly that it's a lot blurrier than we think. And that's I think speaks to the tooting our horns here, but I think that speaks to the skill of like good astrologers is we're able to delineate and individuate while also understanding that everything is related.
mm-hmm.
So, Slay, I want to thank you guys and Kathy, who was not here today, but I want to thank you too and Kathy for participating in the series and making it so very special. I've gotten a lot of feedback that this is like people's favorite.
Oh,
So I want to thank you guys for being here and slaying with me. So thank you.
thanks for having us.
Till next time, we'll see you for our next series.
Woo.
Bye.
Bye.